Thank you so much for tuning in for the Calvary Briefing on May 5th, 2020. Some of the words that we are hearing and using are words and phrases that we have never used before. We talk about self-quarantine. We talk about isolation. We talk about safe at home orders. And one of the things that we know that is happening is we are more alone than we have ever been before. I was talking to someone the other day, and they were telling me about a coworker, and they had been on a scheduled Zoom meeting, and this particular coworker hung on after the meeting was over in order to continue talking. And the idea is that we're all lonely, and we want contact. We want other human beings around. And each one of us is probably going through some form of feeling isolated and lonely these days. I couldn't help but think of Paul as he wrote to Timothy at the end of the letter called 2 Timothy. He wrote these words, "Do your best to come to me soon, for Demas, in love with this world, has deserted me and gone to Thessalonica. Crescens has gone to Galatia, Titus to Dalmatia. Luke alone is with me. Get Mark and bring him with you, for he is very useful to me for ministry. Tychicus I have sent to Ephesus. When you come, bring the cloak that I left with Carpus at Troas, also the books, and above all, the parchments." As I read those verses, I can feel the loneliness of Paul. All of these friends are gone, and he is isolated, feeling as if he has no friends and no one but God. Well, loneliness is not something that is particular to just you. We are all feeling it. And recently, an author by the name of Susan Metcus wrote an article about loneliness. And she writes this: "Loneliness begins with disappointment. It's a failure to belong the way we want to connect with others securely enough to exchange opinions, jokes, interests, concerns, secrets, all the things we naturally fall into when we're with close friends." Each one of us can relate to the fact that we don't have that right now during this time of self-isolations. As we look at the way that the world is, we realize that loneliness is all over the place. In her article, we read also that in 2019, the insurance company, Cigna, found that 61% of Americans considered themselves lonely. This was up 7 percentage points over 2018. That was before all of the pandemic issues started to hit us head on. Loneliness is a real issue. It's something that we all are dealing with. And yet, it's something that God is not oblivious to. In fact, before the fall of man in Genesis chapter 3, we find that God addressed the problem of loneliness. You might remember that Adam was all by himself. What did God do? God gave Adam a companion, Eve, because he was alone and because God did not want him to be lonely. God also looked at this issue of loneliness as he founded the church in the New Testament. It's interesting to me that as you read the New Testament, 100 times you will find the phrase one another. 100 times. 59 of those times, we find that the phrase one another is used as a direction to tell us how to behave toward one another, how to treat one another, how to relate to one another. It's interesting, isn't it, that God has given us his church. From the very beginning of time, it wasn't God's will for us to be alone. Well, as we face loneliness and as we deal with these times, I'd like to give you a couple of challenges. Challenge number one would be, as you experience loneliness, go to the Word of God and go to God in prayer. It is amazing how loneliness and times alone with God can impact us. Remember that you are never alone. When Jesus left his disciples and gave them the Great Commission in Matthew chapter 28, he promised them he would always be with them. And so God's promise to us is that we are never alone when we are his children. So go to God in his word and go to God in prayer. I want to challenge you, secondly, to go to your phone and go to your computer for the purpose of communication with other people. We can too easily go to our phone in order to just lose ourselves in looking at websites or looking at Facebook or looking at some other social media. Go to your phone, go to your computer for the purpose of communicating with another human being and start to communicate with them. I've been amazed just in the last couple of weeks as I have reached out to people that I haven't talked to for months, how quickly they respond to me and how quickly we even strike up an email conversation. And it's encouraging to me, and I believe it's encouraging to them as well. Finally, challenge number 3, stay on your phone and stay on your computer and finish communication. As my friend told me about his friend who hung on the line because of loneliness, we need to be sensitive to the fact that we may be someone else's lifeline. With so many people in our nation feeling lonely before the pandemic, that certainly hasn't gotten better. We have God to share with them, and we have our lives to share with them. So let's battle loneliness and let's battle isolation for the glory of God. I also want to let you know that if you are lonely and if you want to talk to someone, please call our church office, 303-466-9750. There are people at Calvary waiting to talk to you, waiting to connect to you. 303-466-9750. Don't be lonely.